Hello, this is our project on the first module, The Changing World Economy, which also provides an introduction that explains the global perspective of the entire textbook. From the late 20th century to today, most of the world population lives in a country that contains a global aspect, making the economy and their socioeconomic status connected. Studying the world economy. The economy has various forces that can affect the economic landscape in a more complex way than just cause and effect. Economic geographers interpret the level of effects those forces have based on their location and how they change the economic landscape. There are many global attention-grabbing headlines about changes in the world economy, like implications of the Arab Spring, the AIDS pandemic in Africa, etc. But we need to keep in mind the local changes that don't make the news, like resource grabbing in Africa by developed countries, the rapid spread of GMOs in agricultural production, etc. We need to figure out how to understand the importance of all the different changes going on in the world's economic landscapes. First, we can categorize economic events into different terms to get a better understanding of each one. These terms include general, which are widespread phenomena, unique, which are distinctive phenomena that can be explained by general processes, and individual responses. An example of this would be migration from Ireland to the US due to famine, the general being environmental concerns, and the unique being laissez-faire policies enacted by the government. Singular events are distinctive phenomena that cannot be explained by general processes and individual responses. An example of this would be the rise of the auto industry in Detroit, Michigan due to Henry Ford, simply being he grew up there. Relationships in the economy systems. There is a close relationship between economic organization and spatial change, with many other categories branching off of them, like demographic, political, cultural, social, and technological change. An economic geographer then studies these relationships and creates framework that is logical and thorough, as seen in the image.
The section Economic Organization and Spatial Change focuses on the socio-economic organization of an economy and society. There are 5 most recognized and generalized forms of this economic organization. 1. Subsistence. 2. Slavery. 3. Feudalism. 4. Capitalism. And 5. Socialism. These economic organizations are distinguished by their differences in the relationship between the factors of production and the physical and human capital. For example, under the system of slavery, the labor force is privately owned and is bought and sold similar to the means of production, whereas in capitalism, the laborers don't own the instruments of production but can sell their labor power to the business owners. These economic systems also have a classic and distinctly European development pattern, with subsistence developing into slavery, which develops into feudalism, which further develops into mercantilism, and further advances into industrial capitalism and then advanced capitalism. However, this is Eurocentric, whereas in other countries this development can differ depending on the certain spatial characteristics of that region. For example, in Japan, its feudalism ended when the government introduced state-sponsored industrialization to promote rapid economic development. These differences in development of the economy derive from the spatial and social differences that happen from region to region around the world, and these factors of production include land and the available natural resources, creating a system that's both generalized and unique factors developing economic systems differently in each region of the world.
One of the most significant impacts on the world's economic scene was the development of the capitalistic system of economic organizations. There are 3 phases of capitalism: competitive, organized, and globalized capitalism. The first phase, competitive capitalism, started in the late 1700s in the United Kingdom and continued through the 19th century, extending through northwestern Europe and North America. In this phase, free enterprise and laissez-faire hit its prime economic development. In the early years of this phase, profits were revolved around agriculture and manufacturing and not as much as handicraft. The wealth of NIE's newly industrializing economies increased as a result of manufacturing and imperialism, which guaranteed markets for manufactured goods and supplies of raw materials, greatly solidified their shared wealth. In competitive capitalism, the new competition led to consolidation. Consequently, some businesses prospered, but the less adept businesses became captivated by those successful counterparts. The second phase of capitalism, organized capitalism, was introduced in the early 1900s. At the beginning of the 20th century, new labor practices became more and more necessary for profitability. The assembly line age of mass manufacturing was brought in by Fordism, titled after the automaker Henry Ford. In organized capitalism, a new form of production was created, mass production. This new form of production greatly benefited the market and economy as it lowered the cost of goods and increased wages. Another crucial development in this era was practical connections between business interests and labor unions. In the progressive era, unions expanded in size and power and became yet another crucial component of an organization.
The Great Depression of 1929 through 1934 was a driving factor in making the full transition from classical economic liberalism to more egalitarian liberalism in the United States. The Depression caused the President of the United States at the time, Franklin D. Roosevelt, to create the New Deal program that relied on the federal government to manage economic development and eliminate the negative effects of free market capitalism. Hence, the federal government would now play a huge role in the economic front in the United States. The government essentially managed the national economy and organized the social well-being of all its citizens. The economic policy, which seeks to mitigate the negative effects of private markets through government action and monetary policies, is known as Keynesianism, which was exactly what the United States had shifted towards post-1930, or rather post-Depression. The period after World War II marked an era of advanced globalized capitalism. In this period, we see a shift from industrial production towards sophisticated financial and business services in developed economies. Moreover, new manufacturing technology arose that replaced many labor-intensive manufacturing jobs. This period also marks the rise of transnational corporations, or TNCs. A TNC is essentially a company that operates in more than one country. TNCs were able to surpass national governments and labor unions, as by the mid-1990s, some of the world's largest transnational corporations accounted for 2/3 of national trade, with some having an income that surpassed that of the world's poorest countries. In this period, many conventional markets became overflown with low-cost goods, causing profit margins to narrow and businesses to seek revenue by supplying specialized markets via flexible production systems. Two driving factors for the growth of globalized capitalism would be global information economy and technological advancements. A global information economy is essentially a form of manufacturing and administration where efficiency and competitiveness rely profoundly on knowledge generation and gaining access to information. Information was a key to reaching all markets in a global economy. Technological advancements are possibly the main driving factor in the rise of globalized capitalism as communication and efficiency improved worldwide. More specifically, the internet allowed new companies to capitalize on pre-existing markets, defining a point of heavy disruptive innovation. The internet paved the way for many large online-based companies to arise, such as Google, eBay, and Amazon, that continue to reform the national and global economies today. Further developments in broadband and wireless technologies, cloud computing, and open source development tools gave rise to social media companies such as YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and WordPress, which offered a great source of information and advertisement. The question this leads us with is, has technological innovation peaked? Can we continue to rely upon it for economic growth? It is quite difficult to answer, but the signs point to the answer being no. 80% of the total growth in the late 20th century came from the application of previous ideas. Innovation peaked in the 1800s and has gone downward since.
Next, we have technology and economic development. One of the large terms to recognize is creative destruction. This term, by Schumpeter, is crucial to understanding how new technologies can affect global economies. Creative destruction refers to how the advancement of new technologies may destroy the foundation of old markets. This is one of the major drives in capitalism, as innovation creates new markets. One example of this in the United States is the creation of railroad systems, which essentially led to the demise of canal systems in the West. As new technology is created, a shift in technology systems can be seen. Technology opens up new opportunities and new jobs, but also destroys old jobs. For instance, the invention of combustible engines destroyed almost 350,000 jobs in manufacturing, but also created millions more. new, skilled jobs replace older, more limited jobs. Systems can also be categorized in different stages as seen on the next slide.
Technology systems can be split into 5 different categories. The first category, water, was developed around 1785 in England. This includes very basic water power technology and transportation systems. The second category, steam transport, came around 40 years later in the mid-1820s. People started to implement coal to run engines and found ways to use steel, such as building railroads. By the 1870s, the third category, steel and electricity, was developed. The first cars and airplanes were built, and plastic became a new phenomenon. The first signs of global communication became available with the radio and telecommunication. The fourth category, Fordist, occurring around 1915 in the United States, introduced the idea of the consumer good. Nuclear power and the aerospace industry were also further developed. High technology, the final category that it also includes the present day, introduced groundbreaking technologies such as robots, microprocessors, the internet, and biotechnology. It is interesting to think about when this particular era will end and what new technology will mark the start of another category. Alongside the categories of technology systems, it is important to track the geographical history of specific regions and how that may affect their development. For example, Chicago gained an initial advantage due to their heavy investment in railroads in the mid-1800s. This relationship between an economy, its location, and the location's past can be described as the geographical path dependence. This study of a region highlights the specific advantages and disadvantages a region may have had, such as the lack of natural resources or the lack of trade due to its location. Finally, as stated before, it is clear that new technologies will eventually overshadow the old. A modern-day example of this is the shift away from gas-powered cars to electric cars.
Spatial division of labor refers to how labor is assigned to each group over a certain area. It describes how production specialization can occur on the individual, regional, and global scale. For most of history, labor was organized on a regional scale within a national economy. Such an example is the creation of Ford cars in Detroit. After the 1930s, international division of labor began to take hold on the global economy. With Britain's specialization in high-value commodity industries like iron and steel manufacturing and shipbuilding, the division of production had begun to split across countries. As regions continued to develop specialization in industries, such as steel production in Pittsburgh and granite in New Hampshire, division of labor continued to form more solid boundaries around unique regions across the world.
In the division of labor process, this will happen economy agglomeration, which means a lot of same professional companies will gather in the same place, and then the place will form scale of economy. The scale of economy provides transportation advantage and a cost advantage for the firms. The low-cost products are entering the global markets continuously. The economy agglomeration increases the product's competitive advantage. For example, the chips in Silicon Valley, the Chinese clothing factories, and the automobiles in Detroit.
Increases in production and communication technology has led to many companies having flexible production, which is the ability to rapidly switch between the production of different goods. This environment, along with the trend towards regional specialization, has created the new international division of labor. This concept refers to the tendency of companies to place their corporate headquarters in large cities like New York or Seoul and center their manufacturing in companies with cheap labor and lax labor laws. This development has changed economic globalization as we know it because a good no longer belongs to one nationality. The creation of global commodity chains in which each facet of a business may be located in a different country or region means that even small firms can become transnational. The overall effect of these changes is that economies no longer have national boundaries, and the global economy is not made up of national economies as it once was. The United States automobile industry is not truly American, it is also Japanese, Mexican, and Chinese. As the world economy keeps evolving, we will continue to see the positive and negative effects of globalization.